Geology of the Sphinx absolutely proves it beyond any possibility of doubt that the lost civilization is a fact. I mean, there's no arguing about it. The geology of the Sphinx, if no other piece of evidence existed, that would be enough to establish the validity of the hypothesis if there were such a thing as an open-minded scientist. And these are few and far between. They're the next rarest thing to a fundamentalist Christian who loves his enemies, who are even rarer. And still more rare is a visionary billionaire with a conscience and principles. So anyway.
This series is alluding to the fact that we are a species that has forgotten our past. Collectively, we have no memory of who we are or where we come from. Our recorded history only goes back 6,000 years before becoming a blur. Archaeological findings here and there point out fragmentations of our history, but only fragmentations that we use to create our assumptions on the past. Consider these facts. The human fossil record shows that we have remained the same, anatomically speaking, for at least 180,000 years, which means the humans 180,000 years ago looked exactly like us. They had the same brain size, the same cognitive capabilities. They were as we are now. The current established belief in the scientific community is that we gradually developed as hunter-gatherers for the entirety of that 180,000 years to the present. They say that the transition from the Stone Age to being what we are now took roughly 10,000 years. And yet, the new evidence contradicts this established view. Evidence pertaining to the catastrophic events taking place during the last epoch of time has been surfacing for the last 20 years. The black mat layer at the Younger Dryas boundary suggests some kind of cosmic impact upon the Earth, whether that be a comet, an asteroid, or even a coronal mass injection by the Sun. We will get into the implications of this in episode 9, but for now, I want to focus on the initial evidence suggesting a forgotten episode in our history. A crucial period of time that humanity once developed into an advanced worldwide civilization once before, and that this civilization was destroyed in a series of catastrophic events. These events have been recorded into the traditions and stories of religions all around the world. Skeptics ask, what is the physical evidence of this lost civilization? Let's start with the Sphinx. For those who don't know, the Sphinx is far older than what the Egyptologists claim. The reason being is that there is water erosion carved deep into the original limestone.
Because when you look at the Sphinx, as a geologist with a geological eye, this was not weathered by wind and sand. This was not desert erosion and weathering that I saw on the Sphinx, the body of the Sphinx, which is very difficult to tell because it's been heavily repaired and reworked, but particularly on the walls of what are known as the Sphinx enclosure. The Sphinx enclosure is important because it preserves a lot of the details. They carved down into the rock to free up the body, what I call the core body of the Sphinx. And it's that core body and the walls of the enclosure, more or less the quarry around it, if you want to use that term, that show these ancient weathering, precipitation, erosional features that are incompatible with the last 5,000 years of climatic history on the eastern edge of the Sahara.
This specific water erosion is typically caused by heavy rainfall. This new geological dating contradicts established history, simply because the last time Egypt had a climate that produced a sufficient amount of heavy rainfall necessary to erode limestone to this degree was during the last ice age 12,500 years ago, back when tropical-like conditions permeated the area.
Here you see it in that picture, the vertical fissures that can only be caused by precipitation. The rocks are like a layer cake, so it takes out the softer layers, it recedes the softer layers, some of the harder layers stick out further, but the water also finds its way down crevices and cracks, natural features that are slightly softer, and it forms these vertical fissures. I want to make the point because a lot of people get confused. They say, couldn't it be rising Nile floods? No. Geologically, that would give a very different signature on the rock. It's not floods coming up from the bottom. It's actually precipitation and rainfall runoff coming from above. Initially, I was thinking 5 to 7,000 BC. That was very conservative based on the geological data. But now I believe we're talking prior to 9700 BC for the original construction of the Sphinx. And at 9700 BC, we have the end of the Younger Dryas, the end of the glacial epoch, the end of the last ice age.
What kind of hunter-gathering, forest-dwelling humans were making a massive megalithic sculpture, created not by blocks of stone, but by carving out the original limestone in the bedrock of the earth? Well, given the confirmation that the human brain has remained the same for 180,000 years, perhaps sophisticated technological advances happened once before.
That's lost knowledge. This is one of the blocks of the Valley Temple. These blocks here weigh somewhere around 100 tons each. The biggest modern cranes can only barely handle material of that weight, and those of you who saw The Mystery of the Sphinx know from the interview with Jesse Warren, the project manager, where they had one of these largest cranes, saying that, in fact, the logistic problems of manipulating these things into place today, we at present cannot solve. In other words, this is, however they did this, we don't know.
Back when John Anthony West, Robert Schoch, Graham Hancock, and Robert Bauval first proposed this peculiarity, the mainstream Egyptologists